Do you feel sometimes that no matter how many times you've tried to apply parenting strategies, it seems to you that at some point you end up in falling back into old patterns? And sometimes you're like, oh, I'm just gonna yell because why do I even try? If that is you, that's a sign that you might be stuck in a cycle. And I'm going to share with you a very powerful, one simple thing that is going to get you unstuck. If you relate to this, I want to tell you that you're not alone. It is actually a very common thing for parents of sensitive or neurodivergent kids to feel that the tips and strategies and things that they learn online is kind of like doesn't apply to their kids. If you are there, I feel the same way having an autistic child. Then this podcast episode is for you. This simple yet powerful shift is not another tip or another strategy. It's not even a tool. It's not something you say. It is a mindset shift. It is a mindset shift, and once it happens, it will unlock the door for you to connect with your children at a deeper level, and not just that, for you to finally feel that your parenting gets a lot easier and you get your children's cooperation. Hello, my name is Marcela Collier. I am the host of the Parenting with Understanding podcast. I'm so glad that you're here with me in this podcast episode. Before I move into sharing with you what this simple yet powerful shift is, I want to invite you that if this podcast, if the Parenting with Understanding podcast has given you insight, inspiration, tools, strategies, and you've been finding success in your parenting because of it, would you leave us a positive review? Just open the description, leave us a 5-star positive review, hopefully, and that will help us get to more parents. You can pause the podcast right now, leave the review. If you are driving, don't do so. Wait until you park, and let's go with this simple yet powerful shift that you can start doing in your parenting. I remember that was last week. I have 8-year-old twins. One of them is autistic, and when it comes to instructions, my autistic child has a harder time listening than his twin. Why? Because there is something that it is very real when it comes to autistic kids, ADHD kids, neurodivergent kids in general. And it is something called demand avoidance. So, demand avoidance is not that they're choosing to be defined to you, is that when demands are placed on them, it feels overwhelming. And yes, those are my twins in the background. It may be the audio is picking the little voices up, but work with me because we're in October break. So that demand avoidance is when there is a demand placed on the child feels really nervous and they usually don't follow through. Whereas other times they're able to just follow through on their own without a prompt. Example, my sons, that was last week, it was time to shower. And then usually they go shower without prompting. But that day it was special because their father did not come home early. So that was a little change in the routine. So I noticed that my autistic son didn't go shower as part of his routine as usual. And yes, I told him, hey, it's time to shower. That little demand on him on its own creates anxiety. So what happened? When children feel a demand on them and they're not able to handle it appropriately, then they enter into their stress response. Fight, they fight you. How does your child fight you? If you're watching from YouTube, let me know in the comments. They flee. That's what my son did. He literally ran and hid under the bed. Or they freeze. Freeze is that when you feel that they're ignoring you, they're not really ignoring you. They're free. They're frozen. They're in their stress response. So he ran and hid under the bed. So what's the one simple shift that could have changed the game for you if you are in the same thing, in the same position as I was, telling my child it's time to shower, and instead of showering, he goes and runs under the bed. The one simple yet powerful shift is when you give an instruction and then you see your child entering their stress response. Stop the instruction and focus on connection. The one simple shift is to stop control, stop the instruction, and focus on connection. Why is this important? Because once they are in their stress response, it's really hard for them to listen and to listen willingly. If we keep stressing on the instruction, you have to shower right now. I already told you once. Come on, let me go take you to the bathroom. I'm cooking. By the way, I was cooking dinner. I'm cooking. You need to be showered before you go to the table. That's the expectation in my house, that they need to be showered before they go to the dinner table. If we focused on the instruction, on the power control dynamic, we would not go anywhere with our sensitive and neurodivergent kids. And with any kid, really, but especially our sensitive kiddos. So instead of that, I apply my simple yet powerful shift. And I put on pause my agenda, which is getting him in the shower. I went under the bed and I started interacting with him because I saw that he was in his stress response. I started modeling coping strategies, which that time it was deep breathing. And that's when things took a very weird yet fun turn. When I modeled the first deep breath, I took a deep breath and I exhaled. My son, he was like, "Oh, mom, your breath stinks." And I'm like, "Yes? It stinks like what?" I wanted to engage him in a fun way. I wanted him to connect with me and get his giggles, because once they are connected, it's a lot easier to gain their cooperation. However, I want to say that that was not my end goal for me to use connection so he can listen to me. That wasn't the agenda. I put on pause the instruction and I just connected to him. And then he said, "Yes, it stinks like a dragon." And then I'm like, "Okay, you got me going." I started doing like I was a dragon, and I started breathing as a dragon and shooting out fire out of my mouth with my stinky breath. And he was running away from me, but laughing at the same time. And I connected to him. I finally caught up to him. And then he says, "Son," in between giggles. And we were really kind of like tumble playing on the floor. "Okay, so the dinner is going to be ready really soon. And the expectation is that once we are on the table, we already have to be showered. How do we do this? Do you want the dragon to take you on her dragon's back to the shower?" And he said, "Yes, the dragon has to take me on her back to the shower." Okay. So we did a little piggy ride and we went to the shower and he showered. Now you might say, "I don't have time for all of this, Marcela." I don't have time, or at the end of the day, you said dinner time. That's the time that I'm the most exhausted. Let me tell you something. Was I tired? Yes. Was I ready to finish the day? Yes. Did I want him to get in the shower? Yes. Regardless, you are going to spend your time. Are you going to choose to spend your time in power struggles? Or are you going to choose to spend your time connecting with your child so you can, from connection, have a better chance of getting cooperation? Well, if I have to choose between how I want to spend my time, I chose the second one. Because to be honest, power struggles take the same or even longer than engaging our children in connection. So, yes, I understand that we are busy parents, and yes, I understand that we have a timeline for things. But regardless, we are going to spend our time. So, how are we going to spend our time? That's the answer. That's the big question for you. Now, it is important for you to understand this. When we move towards connection with our children, when we put on pause the instruction and move towards connection, it's hyper important for us to feel connected, to feel calm, or at least to feel grounded and connected. Otherwise, they're going to take that moment of us trying to connect as disingenuous, kind of like she really looks overwhelmed and frustrated. She's kind of like talking to me between her teeth. He's talking to me between his teeth. They're going to read through those lines and they're going to feed off always on how regulated or dysregulated we are. So if you say, hey, I've tried playfulness, my question to you is, and this is judgment free, it's just a self assessment. When you've tried playfulness, has it been from a place of overwhelm, scarcity, and kind of like this is the last resort before I yell? Or is it because you're really truly trying to connect with your child and get to their feelings and get to their, to a genuine interaction with them? Because that's the difference between effective playfulness and not effective playfulness. Now, my question for you is, if it is so hard for you because you are stuck in this cycle of, I try things and they don't work, I even try to connect and I always end up yelling, I have an invitation for you. There is a free class that you can find in HIC Parenting.com. I'm going to leave a card up here if you're watching from YouTube, or if you are listening to the podcast, open the description of the podcast and it's there as well. If you are watching from YouTube, just open the description box from your YouTube video and the link is there. And it is the link to a free class where I share with you the parenting with understanding system of needs that has taken me and 14,151 of our clients from reactivity to raising their sensitive and neurodivergent kids with a lot more peace. If you want to access this class, again, hicparenting.com, or the link is in the description below. Let's keep moving. Why it's important to apply this shift of stop focusing on control and start focusing on connection. Does yelling work? Yes. Yelling could work to gain your children's compliance, but it is a short-lived, short-term strategy. It may work for the first time or two because they're scared, but as they get used to the yelling, you either have to yell a lot harder or more, or add other things like such as threats or consequences to make it work. So does it work? Yes, but it is a short-lived thing. The truth is that connection does not mean we are giving in to the behavior. You might say, Marcela, but if you connected with your child, you're training him that's what it takes from you to listen to you. It's important to understand this thing. When We engage our children, and when we engage them often, they don't necessarily make that connection between she only engages with me, or he only engages with me to get me to the next step. If that's not the training we've been is if that's not what the habit we have in our house, if that makes sense. If you only provide connection and playfulness during these times when you want them to cooperate with you, of course your children are going to get used to, like, in order to gain connection, that's what it's needed from me. I'm just gonna have a tantrum. But if your children have more moments of just playfulness because you want to be playful without anything attached to it, then they're going to see it as part of it as well. It gets tricky when they only see connection when there is kind of like a reason behind it, if that makes sense. There might be, and I call it limiting belief of, hey, so do I give in? Do I give in if I apply this shift of not focusing on control but on connection? Then that means I'm giving in because I'm playing with him and he's not showering. Remember that you're priming the instruction, because at the moment, if your child is not listening, there is something there impairing it. And you may think, or maybe not you, but a lot of people think that you just need to learn the right consequence or the proper tool or the proper thing to say, when in reality is, how connected are your children to you, how seen they feel, how heard they feel, how they feeling with you, what's going to determine how likely it is for them to listen to you. That's very simple. So you don't need more tips to get your children to cooperate, my friend. What you need is the ability to create a nurturing environment where your child feels seen and validated. I have a question for you, and I hope you answer it to me if you are watching from YouTube. What gets your child giggling? What gets your child giggling? For my son, it is pure silliness. He is a silly goose and he loves when I go into silliness. For other children, it might be something else. What gets your child giggling? Type it in the comments, because that's the tool or the exact thing that could open the doors towards connection with your children. If you like this podcast episode, would you share it with your spouse or with a parent friend? Just send the podcast episode right now, share it right now, say, hey, this podcast episode helped me understand how to get unstuck in my parenting. This simple shift, I know is going to help me, and I know it could help us or it could help you. Just share it right now with your friend, and I want you to remember that it only takes understanding of yourself and of your children's needs to transform your parenting. That's Parenting with Understanding. I'll see you next time.